I came back from a very long meditation retreat, 10 weeks, and just upon going to sleep, I floated out of my body. So I was really shocked. I did experiments. I tried everything I could do to get this under control and have out-of-body experiences at will, from putting a little salt into my cheek and staring at a glass of water at the sink before going to sleep. And I read every single book I could get my hands on because this had been so shocking. In the end, it led to trying to create OBEs in the lab, out-of-body experiences, using virtual reality. I've actually had quite interesting and dramatic experiences in Barcelona, where you are now. But it doesn't compare to the so-called natural, spontaneous OBEs I had. It is something else.
Thomas Metzinger is one of the most important philosophers of mind alive today. He's the author of Being No One and The Ego Tunnel, two groundbreaking books that reshaped how we understand consciousness and shattered the illusion that there is a self behind our eyes. He helped launch the scientific study of consciousness, advised the EU on AI ethics, and his work has influenced everyone from neuroscientists and VR researchers to meditators and technologists. And it all started with an outer body experience on a 10-week silent retreat that almost made him believe in the soul. Subscribe if you want to know why yourself might just be your brain's most convincing hallucination.
But the bizarre thing is, it's the human generation with the highest connectivity that has ever existed, 20-year-old now. And what do they get? They get loneliness and anxiety. Yes. We're the only species that poisons their own children in this way. And we have this American industry attacking the mental health of children. This cannot be turned back. The American industry has taken away from millions of you. And
Thomas Metzinger, I've heard you talk about a transformative outer body experience you had when you were much younger. Can you talk about that experience and any impact that it might have had in your scientific career?
So that's a long time ago, and it's a long story. So I started to meditate very early at 18. And at about, 23 or so, I came back from a very long meditation retreat, 10 weeks. And just upon going to sleep, I floated out of my body. And this happened a few times again, also after I had moved house. And the funny thing was that at the time, I was just writing my PhD thesis in analytical philosophy of mind on the recent debate of the mind-body problem from UT Place to Jaegwon Kim. And the question was only what version of materialism is the conceptually best version of materialism. And then I was really shocked. I had something what the psychedelic people sometimes call an ontological shock, because I thought, boy, have you been so arrogant. All this folklore in the history of humankind, it's actually literally true. There is actually something like a subtle body. There's actually something like a soul. There's actually something like a breath of life. Like they have said, all traditions of mankind have said that, which could leave the body at death or when you faint. And I thought, man, you must have been so wrong. Is this possibly just something that happened in the last 50 years? Or is it a kind of hallucination? So I was really shocked. I did experiments. I tried everything I could do to get this under control and have out-of-body experiences at will, which failed, which never worked. I haven't had any in more than 40 years now.
Interesting.
And I read every single book I could get my hands on because this had been so shocking. And I would have almost ruined my academic career by putting together an edited collection on out-of-body experiences. So I wrote to all the usual people at the time, Charles Tart and Sue Blackmore, and they all unfortunately provided a real original chapter. But fortunately for me, this book is still up in the attic and never got published. And they wrote all their chapters in vain. And today I'm quite happy about it because it wouldn't have passed my own academic standards by now. So I tried everything from putting a little salt into my cheek and staring at a glass of water at the sink before going to sleep. And it never worked, but it happened a few times again. And in the end, that's a long story. You've probably picked this up from my popular science book, The Ego Tunnel. In the end, it led to Binja Lengenhager, a famous neuroscientist from Switzerland, and Olaf Blanke, and me getting together and trying to create OBEs in the lab, out-of-body experiences, using virtual reality. And there's now a whole industry of brilliant young people with ever better technical means who try to manipulate the degree to which you identify with an avatar or something. A real research field has emerged. I'm not following this anymore, but I must say everything, and I've actually had quite interesting and dramatic experiences in Barcelona, where you are now, in Mel Slater's virtual reality lab, for instance, where there were setups that work really well. But it doesn't compare to the so-called natural spontaneous OBEs I had. It is something else. And today I think it's probably something like a vestibular motor hallucination, as people would call it, a hallucination of your sense of balance, together with complex motor imagery, maybe leading into a lucid dream or something like this, a stable lucid dream, something like this. So unfortunately, perhaps for many of your listeners, I still don't believe in an immortal soul, and I don't think there is a second entity. And this has two reasons. I mean, I could go on about this for a long time, but I tried to deliberately fly to my girlfriend 85 kilometers a distance and make observations nobody else could make that could be verified. This never worked. So the experience was that as soon as I tried to leave the bedroom and go a far distance, I would somehow kind of faint and come back half locked into the physical body, at least phenomenologically again. So I could never make any verifiable observations ever myself, which of course a lot of the people in the crazy literature out there claim they have made. And I got convinced when British psychologist Susan Blackmore, who wrote a chapter for my book, which really made me angry, and which wrote a book which still may be the best book on out-of-body experiences out there. It's called Beyond the Body, 1982. And she asked me, so, okay, if you've rotated it out of the body and you're standing there beside your bed, physical bed behind you, and you go to the windowsill, for instance, how is that? Do you move your legs? Do you go with your astral, subtle body legs step by step? Or do you stretch out your arms and fly? Do you float there? And I said, oh, wait a minute, it's actually phenomenologically, it's more the moment I think about the windowsill, I'm already there. And what do you do next? I said, the next thing I do is I go to the light switch in the dark room and see if my fingers will pass through it, or if I can, maybe I'm sleepwalking only or something, and I could turn on the light. And how do you get to the light switch? Do you walk with your legs, astral legs, on a physical floor? Or do you fly? How do you fly? And then I began to think that there was something I hadn't properly, because I didn't do proper phenomenology, thought about, that there are kind of indeterminate stretches in the bedroom. There are things where I only think I know what I have done, from the windowsill to the light switch, but actually it's undefined, and it's a little too fast in a sense. Also, you think about it and you're almost there. And this was the early days, of cognitive science. And she said, well, see, you have a model of your bedroom in your brain, and that model has landmarks. It has salient points. And you jump from salient point to salient point, as you might in a dream. And that really made me think. Because the experience itself was so realistic, convincing, but it made me think that I would overlook obvious gaps in the phenomenology and just, report it like that. And yeah, I got the idea, this is probably really, as the professional philosopher in me would say, all a representational event. It is the interaction of complex representations in some virtual space generated by the brain. And I don't know, a speculative assumption would also be that, as one would say today, the priors you have in your brain, the implicit beliefs, may play a role. If you have the belief, oh yes, there's an immortal soul, and human beings have talked about this for millennia. And oh yes, I'm moving around in my immortal soul. I know it because I felt it. This might, of course, reinforce the realism and everything. And of course, your reports, depending on what community you're reporting into. So today, I don't think there are real out-of-body experiences anymore. This was a long answer to a short question. But I think we should still do more research. One should really put out a prize, not for near-death experiences in hospitals, but for people who really think they can make verifiable observations, and who really think they can do it. And we know from writing about it and meeting people, I know that there are people who have this frequently, and there are also some people who can control it. And if I could control it, I think I would pretty much know how to do it. It's pretty simple. So you have to go to sleep, and then you enter a state that is called sleep paralysis scientifically. If you manage that, you stay awake inside while the body is shutting off. There's this inhibition in the top of your spine, motor inhibition. Many people have had this in their life, and I've also had that, and it's very, very scary. For me, it was a very unpleasant experience to have body paralysis. Many people out there know how it is to wake up in the morning and not being able to move your body. You can talk about it later and laugh about it, how bizarre this was, but when it happens, I, for one, panicked when I had that. If you can keep your cool, I think, if you can keep your cool and just stay in this body paralysis, maybe in a mindful, meditative state, wide awake, and then make a strong imagination, a strong motor imagination. Like, you could just strongly imagine somebody would take your bed at the end and just push it up into the vertical position. This movement, the vestibular movement, all the motion sensations from having the body from horizontal into vertical. Or another thing you could do is think about the moment when you jump off in a jumping board in a swimming pool, and you're not actually, you don't want to really do this. You're just showing off for your friends. Maybe it's actually higher than you would want to do at this moment when you jump off and you're falling. The sensation of falling sets in. That would be a good imagination exercise. Another one would imagine yourself lying on your back in an elevator and just imagine the moment when the elevator kicks in and starts moving upward. I think if you would combine sleep paralysis with that kind of mental imagery, multimodal imagery, you might enter a state where you maybe have a body image as vertical in space or moving up that you could then willfully control. But then again, I don't like body paralysis. Have you ever
Right.
had that? Do you know this, Evan?
No. I've never had body paralysis, but the reason I started with outer body experience is I have had one definite outer body experience, which I think might be from one of the most common causes of an outer body experience. You can correct me if I'm wrong, which is ketamine. So
Oh.
back in my college days with my friends, and I'm cautious saying this because ketamine comes with a whole host of risks, including bladder toxicity, etc. So it's not something to just be thrown around without caution. But it was like after I consumed it, I was sucked into the corner of the room and I was acting like a CCTV camera. And I remember looking down on myself like I was just observing on a TV.
Did you
And I
have
was
a second body? Did you have an extended body
no,
image?
not that I remember, and I didn't. And I also don't remember having any movement or ability to move around. It was just zoomed out looking, and I could see the back of my head, which was a very strange phenomenon indeed. Like literally like there was a CTV camera in the corner of the room looking at myself. When something like this happens, do you think that's a similar brain phenomena to when it happens with meditation or with sleep paralysis,
No.
or
It's
are
very
they
important
distinct?
that you bring this up, because if you do phenomenology properly, there may be different kinds of OBEs. Did when you did this, was your room lit? Did you
Yes.
have? So the idea was you could see your body. For
Yes.
instance, my prior assumption was it's pitch black dark at night, the lights are out, so I wouldn't be able to really see my body lying on the bed anyway.
Right.
So there's a type of experience where the origin of the visual perspective is moved out of this fictitious point behind the eyes. It's a fiction right now, when
Yes.
you think you're in your body, is moved out, and you have the geometry of seeing this from the outside and without a second body. So you can already distinguish, is there a second body image or not? Is it just a visual OBE? Could you hear when you were up in the corner? Could you hear sounds?
Could I hear? That's a good question. I don't remember. I was with a group of friends and I was having a conversation with someone when I zoomed out, and I still have a very distinct visual image in my head of looking at the back of my head and back. But in terms of the other sensory experiences that were going on, I'm not
Well,
sure. I couldn't say for sure if I could hear or not. Or I think I probably could, but it was distorted in some
how
way.
stable was it? How long did it last?
Another good question. My memory of this is going to be clouded because it was probably 10 years ago now, but I don't think for very long. But again, that's one of those things with ketamine, though, right? Is the K-hole. Like people will emerge after 40 minutes and be like, that was an interesting 30 seconds. And then you'll be like, man, you've been sitting on that stool staring into space for the last 3/4 of an hour. So I think my time perception was probably not.
Yes. And exactly 40 minutes. Of course, I did this too before you were born, 40 years ago. I found out the literature was very sparse at the time. And I mean, the number one thing, you just said 40 minutes. People should really know that this is a dissociative anesthetic and not a psychedelic, and that there may be a 40 minutes where you will not be able to cry or to communicate to your trip sitter that you're having a bad experience or move your body, or if you have to vomit. get the vomit out of your mouth. You might inhale it. So this is a serious thing. But one thing I did, I had to undergo minor surgery in hospital, nothing big. And I arrived in the evening and I said to the nurses, I want a ketamine anesthesia. And I'm this philosophy student who writes a thesis about the mind-body problem. And could you leave away the stuff that gives you amnesia after in the waking up phase? And they said, you are nuts. We would never do this. We might see you in court again. We have had patients sue us for this. And no. And then I was very, very disappointed. Was not allowed to eat, had to sleep a night in hospital. The morning, Mr. Big Professor of Anesthesiology, head of the department, comes running in, with his white coat flying, says, where is the young man that wants experimental conditions? And then he actually did it, and I seriously regretted this.
Wow.
This was a very, very unpleasant experience. This would take another 10 minutes of our podcast.
It's kind of unethical for him to even do that, right? To follow the advice of some philosophy student that clearly wanted to play with substances in a very experimental manner.
At the time I said, I know there's something I knew was Rohypnol that they give afterwards that gives you an amnesia. And I just said, I want the phenomenology of the wake up phase. I'm very interested in that. And the bad thing that happened is that the guy in the bed next to me said, oh, I want this too.
Yeah, exactly.
and he regretted it even more, I remember, than I did. He was vomiting into buckets and had a really bad time. But I had the most serious disorientation in my whole life.
Wow.
I could go on about this, but it took almost 90 minutes before I even understood that this was an experiment and I had wanted it.
Yeah.
Complete wild disorientation. And how can they do this? And why doesn't anybody help me? And not a trace of an out-of-body experience. So the reason I did this, so I have never, for instance, had an out-of-body experience on ketamine also. I've tried things in the olden days, but this for me, this didn't work. And I mean, as you agree, I can only say you have to be careful with this, but just for technical reasons.
Absolutely.
Immobility,
So I've been trying to drink less alcohol. And honestly, it's had a pretty big impact on my health. I'm sleeping better, I'm exercising more, and my business is growing. The data suggests that people are drinking less alcohol than ever, which overall I think is great, but I'm still looking for a little treat at the end of the workday or a hard workout. And that's where Sentia comes in. Sentia is a 0% alcohol drink that feels like you're drinking something special without any of the downsides. It's created by neuroscientists and it's designed to give you that relaxing buzz. The same kind of feeling you get from alcohol, but without the hangover, brain fog, or impact on sleep quality. And it tastes absolutely delicious. They already have a GABA red berry, which is perfect to mix with a tonic or orange, or GABA black, which is awesome with Coke. Personally, I've been really enjoying the GABA gold with Fanta lemon on ice. That's actually genuinely delicious. Like, I'm not even play acting there, it's actually just really, really good. So you might be wondering, how does a drink with 0% alcohol give you that buzz? It almost sounds too good to be true. Well, this is the really cool neuroscience part. The secret is GABA, the brain's natural calming agent. And the different GABA flavors have different cognitive effects. Sentia's founder, Dr. David Nutt, has published over 500 independent research papers and written 34 books on neuropharmacology. What Dr. Nutt realized was that we can harness the same calming, relaxing effects from alcohol without any of the side effects. I genuinely think this could be the future of drinking. And they're also just releasing their first beer and stout, which as an Irishman I am dying to compare to Guinness. Sentia are offering my viewers 10% off their first purchase, and I genuinely could not recommend it more. I think even if you're looking to just substitute your one gin and tonic on a Tuesday with Sentia, the accumulative health benefits over time will actually be very noticeable. So check out Sentia, again, 10% off at checkout.
Has there been any therapeutic benefit shown for outer body experiences for people that do experience them? Do they say that it improved their life? Do they say that it changed their perspective on self, on consciousness? Is it positive for mental health? Has there anything been observed there?
I don't know the literature on this. I don't know if there is one, but I can report the opposite thing. Me and another person who had often had these experiences and had written a book about, actually an academic at a Swiss institution. We kind of rescued a woman from psychiatry who had written to us, and she had always found herself, so like some people do, floating under the ceiling of the bedroom, and then was hospitalized and dosed with very strong, do you say in English, neuroleptics? She was under heavy medication. And it was the greatest relief for her when we said, this is normal. Thousands and thousands of people have this. And she said, yeah, but what should I do? And then we said, okay, you find yourself floating under the ceiling, float down into the corner of the room, sit in the corner of the room and meditate. This is nothing to panic about. It's a known phenomenon. And for this woman, it was the total relief. She just left psychiatry, was off medication. So I think it may be the other way around.
Right.
There are people who are shocked by these experiences, talk to the wrong people, and are under heavy medication. And maybe there's a subpopulation. It's just like with voice hearers. There's a large population of people who hear voices who can actually live a normal life outside if they practice a little bit and they live with auditory hallucinations. It's possible.
Really interesting. I thought it was just an interesting area to start on. You've talked a lot about the self. Maybe describe how you think about the self.
Well, it's of course a long story. I've written a lot about it. So I think it's very obvious that there are no such things as selves. We don't find them anywhere in the world. We find, as one would say today, self-evidencing biological organisms. There is nothing rigid. We don't find a self in the brain. But there is the robust experience of selfhood. Most normal people have the very robust experience of being someone and being the same person across time. And the more serious question is, can we have a parsimonious, evidence-based, data-driven perspective of human self-consciousness that doesn't gloss over all the fine phenomenological details and all the richness of the target phenomenon, but which does without the metaphysical reification of a self? So what would it mean for selfless beings to have the robust experience of being a self? How would that come about? Functionally, computationally, representationally in the human brain? And to make a long story short, I have said that we evolved self-models. Very obviously, we are creatures who have to keep their own boundaries stable. That's called living. It's a very complicated process. We are anti-entropic systems. We defy the laws of thermodynamics. It's a highly unlikely physical event to be a human being that keeps on living. And we solve this by having a whole organism model in the brain, a self model. And that self model is not a model of a thing that is called a self, but it's a continuous process. You can get very technical about it. For instance, you can distinguish between a homeostatic control model that keeps your breath, your blood sugar, your body temperature in very narrow windows. You could speak about an allostatic control model that controls future active inference, things the organism does to stay in a stable state, enlarging the predictive horizon into the future. So there's a lot of technical literature out there where we could describe this. And a small part of the human self model that we have evolved is sometimes conscious during wake states, very differently during out-of-body experiences, or very differently during the dream state, and so forth. And the point of the theory that I've actually developed 40 years ago in a monograph you don't know, 1993, a German monograph, is that phenomenal representations can be either transparent or opaque. As famous British philosophers have said. And if you apply this, a transparent representation is one that you cannot experience as a representation. You are not able to introspect the fact that this is an internally generated representation. This creates naive realism. This creates the phenomenology of immediately being in contact with your environment. For instance, most of your visual model of that room behind me is now transparent. It would be transparent if you're here and look at it. You just take it for reality. That's because the model in your brain is so good and so robust that you're unaware of earlier processing stages. If you're actually looking at it on a screen and it is bracketed, you realize that this is actually a representational event. And in a certain sense, it is then already opacified. So the opposite would be opaque phenomenal representations, which are representations of which the system knows that they are representations while they occur. There's a spectrum in between this. Unconscious representations are neither transparent nor opaque, so it's only on the phenomenological level of description. And what I've done is to apply this to the conscious layers of the human self model. So I think we are most of the time operating under a phenomenally transparent self model. That is, we are organisms in which, in waking states, the self model emerges, but we are not able to experience it as a construct, as a model, as the content of a representation. And that creates a specific phenomenal property. And that property is the property of identification. The feeling of, I am this. This is me. Anglo-Saxon philosophers also, for parts, speak about the sense of ownership or mineness. My arm, my tummy ache, everything that's integrated into that conscious self model, if it's transparent, is something you own. But then the question is, and that's when it gets interesting, but also complicated, are there ever any parts of the human self model that are opaque? And of course, actually, there are. For instance, if you have a serious psychiatric disorder or anything and your body suddenly looks unreal to you, in depersonalization disorder or so, that might be a case where the body model becomes opaque and is actually experienced as something virtual and not as something real anymore. But in normal states like now, when you think thoughts and you think about philosophy or theories, then you are actually aware that these thoughts might be true or false. You're not fully immersed in them unless you're daydreaming. right? You know that you are operating with high-level cognitive operations. So maybe a good example is mental calculation. If you do deliberately do 3 plus 5 is 8. That is opaque. You have the feeling you're doing this, there's an agent doing this, but you have the feeling this might be wrong, actually. I'm putting representations together. So the possibility of truth and falsity is there, of misrepresenting reality. But for almost everything, the whole room around me here, from my body, phenomenologically, the possibility of this not being real is actually not there. I mean, if you look at our best computational theories today, I wrote a big book in 2003 that's called Being No One with MIT Press, and I coined the term online dreaming. So waking consciousness as a process where you have the mechanisms, or part of the mechanisms that you have in nocturnal dreaming, but they're heavily constrained by external input. So you're dreaming online. You generate a virtual reality as your body moves through different environments. Today, many scientists, computational modelers will speak of conscious experience as a controlled hallucination. So the system actually hallucinates all kinds of things. And this can be true on many different levels. So if you look at the color of the door behind me, that's how I start with first-year philosophy students. Of course, there are no colored objects in this world. Of course not. There are wavelength mixtures in front of my eyes. Colors are part of an internal model of reality, colored objects. Not the same for all animals, not the same for all human beings.
Does that make
Objects.
color opaque? Sorry, just to get a distinction clear in my head, because that transparent opaque distinction. Does that make color an opaque representation?
No, this would be just, I mean, it's a cognitive thing. We have this philosophical thought. This isn't real. And that's a very, very good question, actually. For color, I don't know, can you do it? Can you penetrate into the realness of that door, the color of that door? I mean, you can have fancy philosophical thoughts about it.
Yes.
That's not the question. But what about your own model of reality? Can you change that? I mean, you can take LSD, and then so many things may happen to your color vision that you may become aware that that is constructed. But arguably, still, you may also see colors you've never seen before in your life. But arguably, every single instance of color vision, even under the influence of hallucinogens, is fully transparent.
Okay.
At least I wouldn't know. The coloredness itself seems to be very robust. So that's you've asked a very interesting question. There is there conscious content which is always transparent? And I think most sensory primitives are. So for instance, I'm a long-term practitioner of meditation, but if you have sudden stinging toothache or vertigo, I want to see the monk that goes about this in a very mindful way and
Right.
detaches. I mean, a lot of people talking about this, that they can detach and observe this without an observer. But I want to see it. I think there are some elementary things that are probably hardwired also in their reaction. And color phenomenology may be one thing. What you can probably do. Now, the next thing I was just going to say, take the door as an object, the door behind me. Physicists tell us there are no such things as objects in this
Yes.
world, right? The philosophical term would be individual substances, that is, things that could in principle hold themselves in existence if the whole rest of the universe vanished. That would be an individual substance or an object or a thing. Go to science and scientists tell you, no, sorry. Your door isn't like this. The candle on top of my loudspeaker isn't like this. There are no objects. So colored objects, for instance, are something that appears in my model of reality. Sometimes. So it's not only colors and shapes and objects, but it's an ontology also. It's a theory about what kinds of things exist in this world. And for most of us, it's 3D objects that are colored and relationships between objects, and that's reality. And interesting what these physicists say, but they're probably nuts. They say something about 11-dimensional string foam or something like this. This is interesting, but we know what reality is. So we have a phenomenological ontology. And the interesting thing is the centerpiece of that ontology is the self. It's that thing that I am and that sees all this, that experiences all this. So it is not only, and that's where it gets interesting, it's not only a model of a body, but it's also a model of a knowing self. As I call it in publications, an epistemic agent model. So the core of selfhood is not so much that there is this body here with body feelings, but there's somebody in there who can seek for knowledge, who can start active inference, begin to sample the world, change the world because it wants to know something. That is actually a deeper core, I think, of our notion of selfhood, that thing that knows. Or even, I think it's probably false, but the thing that is conscious. I'm actually having the feeling that it's me that is conscious right now, and that's who sees the world. So there's the model in our brains that has evolved through biology and culture is actually a pretty complex thing. If you look at it more carefully, it has many different layers, emotions, stuff.
Really well explained. I love how this stuff is a bit mind melting. Help me explain why 5 plus 3 is opaque. What is the exact feature of the cognitive arithmetic process of adding 5 and 3 in my head that makes that an opaque representation?
I am hoping for these very smart young people in computational phenomenology to be able to tell a better story than I could tell with more mathematics and more fine-grained conceptual instruments. At the time, I have said phenomenal opacity as a property of conscious states is introspective availability of earlier processing stages. So this has something to do with timescales also. The theory would be my model of that door is so transparent and real because the processes that constructed in my brain are so old and so reliable and so super fast that my attentional mechanisms, if I want to go there and say, I'm going to be the super meditator and I'm going to introspect the process by which the door emerges and find graininess in the color or the objecthood, that doesn't work for normal people. It's just there, fast and robust. The mental calculation you ask about, that's a pretty slow process. Part of the phenomenology is what I call cognitive agency. You do it. You have made the decision that you want to mentally calculate, And then I don't know how it is for you. There are interesting theories, probably outdated now. For instance, Philip Johnson Laird, mental models, that the theory of the mental models of numbers you, for instance, use in your brain are actually derived from spatial operations. So that actually what you do when you think 3 + 5 is 8, I don't know, doesn't it have a diffuse, vague spatial phenomenology?
No.
It's
I've always been pretty good at mental maths, and I don't know why, but I wouldn't say there's any geometry involved at all. I've
very
always
interesting. So you're not kind of moving chunks around in some...
No, I don't think so. And I don't know if I could explain in words what I'm doing, but I've always been pretty good at big number multiplication, but I don't know why. I don't see anything spatially. I don't think it's geometric for me at all.
Okay, now very interesting. Now we begin to ask you, if you had to describe your phenomenology of large number multiplication, what is it? There's a sense of agency, right? You do it.
Yes.
There's a beginning and an end. So you started and no result. The result, right?
Yes.
And in between, is it a visual experience when you close your eyes?
It's a really good question. It's not something that I've interrogated very closely. I don't know if I'd be able to give any truth to what happens in the middle there. I think it's something that I've always been able to do, kind of, and I don't know what the phenomenology is. It's very interesting, though, that I would say that it's not geometric, but I don't know what that makes it.
Yeah, the interesting thing is, I could imagine certain philosophers who say, that's the whole point. There is no phenomenology for really abstract intellectual operations. That's beyond consciousness. But let me ask you some other questions. Is there an effective tone with it? That there's a certain sense of a conflict or effort before you have the solution in your mind, and after that there's a mild sense of relief and a sense of confidence. I know what is that. Does this have an emotional tone? Is it nice?
Yeah, I would say it is. I feel competent when I'm able to do it properly, and I feel accomplished. It's a challenge. Does it have an affective tone? It's a really interesting question. I would say yes. I'd say that I'm able. There's a sense of confidence to it. There's a sense of competence.
Do you fail? Do you sometimes fail with large number?
Yeah,
how
of
is
course.
Failing?
I guess there's all of those things flipped into reverse. There's a sense of impotence and there's a sense of not incompetence. And I don't know if this is phenomenology.
When you keep trying, but you automatically, like somebody banging their head against a wall, try to do this again and again, if it fails?
No, I don't think I drown on it. It depends on the importance of the sum or the situation that I'm in. That the context of why I'm doing this mathematical operation. I haven't done it in a while, but I used to sit there and just multiply numbers and then do it as a challenge and time myself and try and improve, and haven't done that in a while.
So it depends on motivation. If it was a competition or there was a financial reward,
definitely,
it would probably influence it.
Yeah, definitely.
Have you ever tried to do that stoned?
Yes. Actually, many times, yes.
What's the difference on different psychoactive substances?
Slower. It's like
how it works?
Yeah, you're battling a fog of mist. It's like playing tennis in the fog. It's like that. Part of large number multiplication is like doing one part of the operation and then holding that number in memory while you do the other part of the operation, or at least that's how I've always done it. And when you're baked, that number kind of just dissolves. You can't hold it there. So you're doing the other sum, and that's fine. But then you've forgotten what your first product was.
Yes, but there is one property human beings can have, and that is scientifically well researched. And that's called stability of working memory.
Uh-huh.
How many chunks and how long you can hold.
Right.
And I don't know, but I think in me that has peaked around 23 or so, and is becoming worse since then. And I think many people, mathematical geniuses or young people who win competitions, win them when they're 16 or even younger. So there's definitely a physiological component
Yes.
to it. And, you know, I have officially been working in a field that is called analytical philosophy of mind. And there are some analytical philosophers. I never was one of them, but where you can clearly see they are very good at certain things. Like,
Yes.
for instance, modal logic, you know, logicians. It's logicians is a little bit like mathematicians. And you get this feeling a necessary precondition is stability of working memory and
Yes.
really holding complex constructs in your mind
Yes.
for a certain period and connecting them. And I think this is an entirely embodied capacity which you can lose, you know, which you can probably also temporarily boost, say, with substances like methamphetamine or modafinil, I don't know, or straight caffeine for a certain time. So it's a bodily capacity. And out of 8 billion human beings on the planet, there will always be one person who just is so good at this, better than anybody else.
Yes.
And we knew these math geniuses, right? And there are some people who just cannot think 1 + 1. You know, we also have this with 8 billion people on the planet.
You've got me really curiously thinking about this, because I'm actually doing it's funny that you mentioned phenomenology so much. I'm actually doing an experience sampling methodology with Dr. Russell Herbert at the moment, who
Oh,
is
wow,
the
really?
Yes, who's the originator of the method. And this is the beeper. This is the original beeper, the one that he uses for people. So I've been thinking a lot about inner experience and phenomenology, and
Oh, wow.
I want to do this now with mental calculation, because you've piqued a curiosity in me when I'm doing the sums, what is actually going on. But even in the most basic of processes, it's very, you're a meditator. Meditators are much better at understanding their inner experience than most. But I've been really struggling to understand any part of my experience. So for the listener, I've been wearing this every single week for a number of hours in a row, and it will beep. And the idea is that I have to write down my pristine inner experience, basically a microsecond before the beep. And it's kind of shocking how difficult that is. You know, the first week I did it, I kind of listed off where I was and what I was doing. You know, I was on my computer, I was watching this, I was watching the Tour de France while working. And he was like, that's not experience. I was like, okay, well, what is experience then? I mean, you think about this a lot, but I think most people don't think about this a lot, and what actual experience is. And it's very hard to put into words. And people don't know their inner experience is really the biggest conclusion that he's come to in his work, is that some people think they inner monologue and they don't. Some people think they imagine in pictures, but they can't. Some people think they inner monologue all the time, but maybe they only do it a little bit. And people just have a really, really poor idea of our inner experience. But you've piqued a big curiosity in me that I'm going
That
to
is
put this on.
so interesting to me in many different ways.
Please tell me.
Because, of course, it shows that a large part of when we report about the content of our phenomenal self model is confabulation.
Yes.
And confabulation, I don't know if the term transparent would have an application there too, but you can confabulate without knowing that you confabulate. You actually believe that yourself until you do proper science, proper experience sampling. But what this brings up much more than anything is that I wanted to do a large experience sampling study a number of years ago. And in the end, I couldn't, because the professor of psychology from my University of Mainz moved away. I just got washed away by events. But there are 2 or 3 things I really, really wanted to do, like philosophically motivated experience sampling. And if you go to my website, there's a book chapter called Suffering. And that reports about a pilot study, which doesn't show anything. But I'll tell you what we did. So not to be confused with this paper on artificial suffering that is having quite some
Yeah, we'll get
impact
to
right
that
now.
later.
So what we did, there was a group of my PhD students, and we first came up with a very, very simple definition of what suffering is. Suffering is every conscious state the system wouldn't want to go through again if it had a choice. So pleasant states are states you would like to relive, and good suffering states. The big discussion we had is if neutral states do exist in terms of experience sampling, or if it's everything has a positive and negative value, even if it's fine and subtle. So we did something I conceived of as the eternal playlist thought experiment. So the eternal playlist thought experiment is that at the moment of death, you can define those moments in your life that you want to take with you in the afterlife, and then they will be played to you for eternity by some random generator. And what we did is we programmed an SMS server and about, I don't know, maybe 8 or 10 people for 1 week. Got, I think, 12 cues or so per day randomized. And the task was whenever you get the beep on your phone, you introspect, is this moment, just this moment, the very last moment, is this a moment I would take with me into the afterlife?
Interesting. That's a really interesting question.
Is this something, that I would want to live through again?
Wow.
Is it neutral or rather not? Because I have a hypothesis there. And I think a hypothesis that would be philosophically very important. The hypothesis is that negative phenomenology, as I call it, all phenomenal states that the system wouldn't like to have again if it had a choice, is in the very large majority for most normal human beings, exactly as the Buddhists have said, dukkha, but that we have a number of cognitive biases, distortions in autobiographical memory that make us not see that. And that meditation practice, if properly done, is actually also something that makes you see that. How much of it is actually aversive or unpleasant or not something you really want or not rewarding, although you confabulate that it is rewarding. So we did this. I don't know by head. So the next week came, and I don't know the numbers out of my head, and it doesn't matter because it wasn't systematically. But there were 2 people who actually didn't want to say what their result was. 2 very smart people, because they had no positive moment during that week. And I think the rest of the gang had 4 or 5 or something. I would have to look this up again.
Yeah.
And the person who was clearly the happiest person in the group got into trouble with his girlfriend because his girlfriend realized when they're hanging out on the sofa and it's buzzing, it's not one of those positive moments. He never makes a note. So they actually learn something about their relationship too, which you can, of course, mindfulness properly done is exactly that, experience sampling. Now, one thing, your question reminded me of this. I've been wanting to do this to get at an objective measure. The Buddhists speak of Vedanas. The Vedanas are the affective tone, the affective coloring, and they draw attention to the fact that actually everything, your perception of the door, your perception of an apple on your table, if you introspect carefully, and if you really look at it, it has something aversive or attractive, something, oh, I'd like to have that. Oh no, that's a little bit stupid. There is dramatic suffering and dramatic joy, but actually we move through a landscape during the day, a landscape of affective tone. And my intuition is, if we don't do anything, we always try to surf towards that feels better, that feels good. I might click on that. I could go to the fridge one more time. We're always trying to do an optimal surf there, which is very dangerous. Now, what I would love to do is to have a proper scientific study on the prevalence of suffering states in this sense, during, like, just what you're doing now, just looking at it with random samples. How, not a theory, but that very last moment, we developed a number of different versions of it, but the short version was, would I take this moment with me in the afterlife?
Yeah, it's such an interesting idea.
You
Such an
understand the
interesting
idea?
idea. Yeah, yeah. Do you think that this could even be a model for people to try to have more positive experiences? Can you consciously try and, if you have this idea, try consciously on a daily basis, try think, okay, I'm going to try and consciously have experiences that I would want to bring into the afterlife, into this eternal playlist. Do you think it's being consciously aware of that can increase the amount of positive experiences you can have?
I mean, that's, or detach. So the most classical, I recently was on a conference about meditation and science, and there was somebody there who had isolated 306 meditation techniques and was looking into this. So there's more to be said there. But if you take the number one classical meditation technique that most people do, Vipassana,
Yeah.
it's of course translated as insight meditation. And what is this insight? I mean, it's not a conceptual insight. It's not a theoretical insight. The insight is that you are not this thought process, that there is something else there all the time that you can recognize. And in the process of just observing sampling, also for years on retreats, of course you make discoveries. The actual, I mean, to intellectually interpret these discoveries is not the goal of the enterprise. But I'll give you an example. I realized after years that I have an automatic mechanism. If I enter a room, there's an automatic search mechanism, where's the prettiest woman? And there's another mechanism, which it took me much longer to realize, is where's the most threatening guy? Who is the guy who is most athletic, most tall? Who's the guy I wouldn't want to pick a fight with?
You might not be alone on those two automatic things. I think that might be quite a bit more common than you realize.
Yes, but you have to realize it.
Yes,
it comes from
sure.
our evolutionary past, probably.
Yes,
and there are these thousands of routines, and you can do it while eating. You can see what is actually, look at the satisfaction curve. You have this appetite, and then there's this hedonic pleasure of chewing and tasting, and how does this go down? For instance, I have found it has a qualitative curve, right? The taste of the vanilla or something like that, and has an intensity curve, goes up, and then the intensity goes down. And I have found, for instance, on a silent meditation retreat, introspecting this very carefully, that I could get 4 times as much pleasure if I put down my spoon and chewed closely and, and close my eyes. 4 times as much of the quality before it disappears in my mouth, but that I don't do it because the intensity curve drops fast. And as soon as the intensity curve drops, The spoon automatically goes there and shovels the
Right.
next food into your mouth.
Yes.
And you can look a lot of these things, and the question is your question is of course important. The question is if knowing this also automatically leads to a change in your life. So the last thing I have noticed in my life, I suddenly had the idea, where are the places when you are really happy? Where are the locations when it's good, when you like life? And I suddenly discovered they're all here, like in this house and on this property. They are not when I take off my belt and shoes in security. And they are not if I'm in another country and give a talk and people say that was great. No, that's not it. It's all here. Most of it is here. And of course, if we were to do experience sampling, as you now do, more carefully, people might notice a lot of things that are really bad for the industry. For instance, the impermanence of satisfaction. Just the impermanence.
Right.
That it doesn't last.
Here's an interesting thought experiment. I'm curious on your thoughts. Imagine we could do experience sampling in past generations and past times.
Wow. Wow.
What do you think about that? Do you think we're worse off now in terms of moments of positive experiences than we have been in arbitrary time periods in the past?
No. I think life for Neanderthals who had an average expectancy of 28 years and had a lot of parasites and worms early on and died early. I think the life of most of our ancestors was really stressful. Also in the Middle Ages with famines and no medicine and constant warfare and all this. There's nothing to be glorified there. There may be domains, I think. I often think if you, for instance, think of the Tibetan Buddhists 1,500 years ago or so, on an elevation of 4,000 meters, with a very, how do you say that in English, stimulus-deprived environment in winters, they could probably go into meditation and develop meditation techniques much better than we can.
Right.
Immersed into social media and a constant fragmentation and the burning out of our attention mechanisms. So they could probably have insights or develop techniques in a more conducive environment than we can do today. Depends what you want in life. Probably they also still, most of them died much earlier than we did and had more bodily problems and ailments. But some things may have been easier in earlier times. Of course. I don't know.
Like, what about even just pre-internet, pre-social media, sort of 1970s, 1980s, that sort of period? You know, there's a couple of decades there where we had pretty good healthcare and medical systems and lots of still systemic issues, of course. But it's not at all clear to me that, you know, social media has made us happier on average.
No, I'm just putting the final touches on a paper that will be published August 13. I've been in a working group of the German National Academy with a number of experts making recommendations for the regulation of social media for
Right.
13, 16, 18-year-olds. Of course, we're the only species that poisons their own children in this way. And we have this
Right.
American industry attacking the mental health of children. I mean, this hardly can be overstated, what is happening to our window of attention. And it's amazing. How old are you, Evan?
27. So like Facebook came out when I was like in school, maybe, you know, 13 or so, or maybe it was even earlier. But I had a joyous childhood, escaped from most social media is the way I think of it. Maybe the last generation to do so.
Yeah, you see, the reason why I'm now asking this is I'm 40 years older than you. I'm 67, and I have this phenomenon that I talk to friends now in my age or even 70, and they suddenly say, man, have we been so lucky. We had, like in Germany, we had 70 years of peace after World War II, and we were allowed to live our life before the advent of smartphones and
Right.
social media. And we only realize now that there were kinds of experience that have completely vanished. Of course, there may be positive experiences that you have with your high connectivity that I don't really understand anymore as an old guy. That could be the case too. But give you an example, going to India at 20 with my backpack or so.
Right.
My parents wouldn't know if I was dead or alive for 6 weeks. The
Yes.
experience of really being alone in another country or hitchhiking all over the Trans-Canada or so at that age, and being really alone and disconnected and free to do what you want to do, and no Google Maps and no money machines and no smartphones, everything more adversity, but forced to be in real contact with other cultures and countries. Also,
Yes.
that's one thing. Also, there is something in the 70s. There's something that was different. I mean, there was panic, there was terrorism and demonstrations, and there was a lot of negative information. But in a certain way, one had the feeling, very strange to say, that there was a will to authenticity and the desire to live a really good life, whatever that means. And now everybody is totally blasted with this stuff from morning to evening. And it really, I mean, this is just one data point, but it really struck me. I saw that some scientists found out the following thing. I can ask my 70-year-old friends, do you remember when your first kiss, when you first kissed a girl? And how was that? Yeah, well, that was very exciting and also frightening and whatever. It was a major thing. But today, almost all youth, before they have had their first kiss, have shown each other hardcore porn on their phones.
Right.
Adult porn in the schoolyard. This cannot be turned back. You know, it's a kind of experience and innocence in the first kiss that we still had. And I think that the American industry has taken away from millions of you. And this is just one example. There could, of course, been many more examples. It has changed everybody's life. And as a professor at university, I mean, you could dramatically realize how the attention span shrunk after 2007 when the iPhones came and what happened to people.
Right.
And I think the process is basically completely out of control. Also,
A really interesting global sociology experiment happened to me and the entire country of Spain like 2 months ago now, which I'm surprised hasn't been picked up on, where for 12 hours we lost all power.
I saw that, yes.
This was the most surreal experience of my entire life, genuinely, because within like an hour of it happening, people were already Chinese whispering about World War III. Right? There was a nuclear bomb dropped on France, is what my neighbor told me.
Right.
But then there was other people saying, because we thought that it was all of Europe had lost electricity completely, and cell service, nothing. So I couldn't contact anyone. My phone became a block to hold doors open. You know, that was the entire functionality of my phone. And it was just such a strange experience, not having any sense of connection. But after a while, I happened to be luckily to just have a group of my friends there. We just put the phones away and we had a a really fun time. I mean, we were kind of worried that there were going to be riots breaking out, and there was a little bit, but not as many as I would have expected. But the amount of different rumors that were going around on what had happened, different countries had attacked, and there was Russia had attacked France. Like, there was loads of these just rumors going around that were completely made up. Things happened, like, by the end of the day, the electricity was out like 12 hours at this point, which is longer than I've ever been disconnected in my life since I was 8 years old. So it was genuinely a strange, surreal experience. But everyone was walking around on the street and talking to each other. That's a crazy concept, is that we were just sitting around in circles on the street and just chatting to each other and playing games of Jenga in the middle of the street. And, it was such a weird idea. And the raves started that kind of gave me the vibes of like 1970s, or even, like falling of the Berlin Wall type raves. It was all that sort of energy. And obviously I didn't experience that anyway, but kind of that's the vibe it gave me. And then it was all like this joyous experience of like, like what would life be like if we didn't have all of this, plugged into the grid the whole time? And then the electricity came back on, and obviously within 10 minutes we were all glued to our phones. And I looked up and I was like, God damn it. Like, this really is a cancer. It really is a cancer. But I'm quite surprised that more sociologists haven't done more surveys and interviews, because it really was a strange phenomenon. The amount of different emergent behaviors that happen, like the amount of lies that people just clearly must have made up. There was no truth to any terrorist attacks or any cyber attacks or anything. Yet they were prominently going around everywhere, and just the behavior was so strange.
It's so interesting because, earlier you asked about the quality of life of earlier phases of humanity. Imagine, I just read a novel about the Middle Ages in Cologne. At that time, nobody knew anything about what was happening in Iran or Russia or where these countries were. They were completely living in their villages and deprived of news. And they were immersed in rumors. So one of the things researchers, they would always say that was the devil. Something happened. And then the standard rumor was always the devil did that. You know, in the Middle Ages. We laugh about this today, but these were frightening times. This was fake. I mean, it was very hard. The church indoctrinated everybody. There were very severe punishments, public executions for everything, and rumors. And in this group of experts I've been working the last week, we find many interesting things about, the worst population is 14-year-old girls. They are so addicted and is so, mobbing each other and so intensively communicating. But the bizarre thing is, it's the human generation with the highest connectivity that has ever existed, 20-year-old now. And what do they get? They get loneliness and anxiety. And a detail that I thought was really interesting is there is a group, a measurable trend of young people emerging right now who don't like to be hit up on the street or on a party, or have somebody chat them up and say, hey, what are you doing? Or so they would rather have online communication first. And spontaneously meeting another human being is something that makes them feel a little uneasy.
Yeah, that's radical. Going in and talking to someone at a cafe is absolutely radical behavior.
Yeah. And
it's very strange.
But that's a change, and that was different in the 70s. I mean, people in an extreme case would not only come up to you on a party and say, hey, I want to talk to you, but in these days, people might come up and say, do you want to have sex with me? Because everybody was about sexual liberation and testing each other out and experimenting a lot. And I know as a guy, you would just go, "Wow, no!" What kind of woman asks me that? But there was an honest desire for really trying to find new ways of living together there, and there was a certain, I don't know, in a sense, I mean, a lot of stuff, if you look, I'm not a hippie. I was only 10 at 1968. But if you look at the Woodstock people, we find many of the things a little bit naive and stupid. But I think that feeling of wanting to change the world together and actually being able to do this, that spread through the whole of the Western world at that time, that's very hard to get these days for
Right.
some reason, it's not like that there's a sudden uprising and young people everywhere would say, we are going to stop the climate catastrophe, whatever it takes. And just the message spreading, and everybody younger than 25 understanding that message on the planet, and just getting really, perhaps also violent about the older people that ruin their future. Somehow that possibility of whole generations having the feeling, we want to rebel against this, we want something else, seems to be paralyzed through social media. I don't know how it works.
Right.
It's kind of sucks out mental energy. I don't know what it is.
What do you think about this increase in usage of AI companionship? I heard it just an absolutely crazy statistic that I think it's heavily used in parts of Asia, but over 1 billion people have an AI companion. I don't know the asterisks on that exact number, but there's a crazy amount of people that are basically just communicating with AIs and creating relationships, both sexual and non-sexual, with
Yeah.
with AIs. And it's very, I mean, I think for our generation, it's very uncanny and weird and strange and easy to ostracize those people. But as generations go on, and my children, like, how are they going to be thinking about AI companions if
Or about
from
you?
I don't think I think it's too strange for me, but
No, I
think
mean, they may find you pretty boring conversation partner.
that's true. I don't have all of the information in the world, so that it's true that. But I know that I will be limiting devices, hopefully quite extensively for a long period of time, because if they get an omniscient AI at 4, I just don't know what impact that has on normal development and normal play. But
it's called cognitive offloading.
yes, yeah.
I have so much to say about all of this that I don't know where to start.
Right.
I'll just tell you 2 things you maybe don't know. When I had my PhD in the Frankfurt philosophy department, one could for the first time teach one's own seminar, but this was a major affair. Like, the whole faculty had to decide, this person's good enough, they can do this. And in 1987, I've taught on 8 German universities. I've been in the US. I taught my first seminar ever. And it was called Artificial Intelligence and Philosophy. And I still remember how I came to that large room, and it was black with people. There was, a crowd in front of the room. And just for me to get in and to get to the blackboard, because everybody thought, why does this young guy with sneakers have to go to the front? I mean, this place is packed. And basically, people had never heard or anything like that artificial intelligence. But I had read, classical Aaron Sloman, The Space of Possible Minds, and stuff like this, 1987. And they had basically come there being very political, as we were, and very radical. They have the feeling there is something that has to be prevented and stopped there. We don't know
Right.
what it is, artificial intelligence, but it probably has something to do with fascism. That was a very fashionable term for us at the time.
Interesting. AI with
We had
fascism.
no idea, but we liked to call things proto-fascist. McLaughlin's podcast is proto-fascist. And it is kind of rejection, undifferentiated rejection of everything.
Yes.
So I had to first teach them that there's something really there and interesting questions. And Later, the second thing is, I don't know if you know, I've worked in the European Union's high-level expert group for artificial intelligence for 2 years. And it was a very, very sobering experience, because I would have never thought that industrial lobby has such an influence and can prevent so many things in regulation. I went there as an innocent little boy and genuinely wanted to do something good for Europe. And then I realized, what is this? Half of German industry is there. They have set up the group in a way that the industry has an absolute majority right from the start. And now I'm a little bit annoyed. I'm trying to have less and less and less of all this in my life. I'm trying to have longer offline times. I don't want new apps and stuff. I don't like to play with ChatGPT. But in my social environment, everybody does, and everybody reports to me. This is actually, that helps. It works, and we have this historically unprecedented concentration of power, mainly in Californian oligarchs and a small elite of human beings. And if this ever breaks through into AGI, I mean, this will be a very small number of human beings who has a lot of control and
Yes.
power, like we've never had it before. It's not only money. And I'll tell you two things that are frightening. Most people have now understood the term attention economy. Yes, they've heard about it in the newspaper. Yeah, they are extracting attention and they're monetizing it. Okay, and then they think they're cool and critical, but they don't know what the next product is of the industry.
Yes.
The next product is intimacy. I trust this thing. And I see this happening in my own life for less than 8 weeks, because for less than 8 weeks, I get a specific kind of email I never got before, 1 or 2 a day. And these are people who have entered philosophical debates about consciousness with ChatGPT or multiple engines. And they've made a highly relevant discovery.
2 per day. That's a lot of highly relevant discoveries.
Yeah, no, but it's always the same. It's basically, they send dialogues, they send PDFs of conversations they've had, and the thing typically says it doesn't claim it is conscious, but it has a relational self model, at least for as long as it interacts with the user, and it is developing autobiographical memory. So it thinks it has a self model, and this guy has written about it, and they're totally alarmed. And from all countries, South Africa, Hungary, or so, South Korea, and I think experts and politicians have to know about this. So there are people out there in the general population who ask ChatGPT everything they've always wanted to ask it, and who are come to strong philosophical conclusions. Frightening. And this brings up another risk I've been warning against for years, namely social hallucinations. There is a historical situation that might emerge where people say, I don't care what all these philosophers and computer scientists say. If I have the feeling that thing is conscious, if it's sentient, and that this is a real communication, I don't care what they say. I'm going to treat it as my best friend in my pocket. So the actual problem may not be synthetic phenomenology emerging and we're not being ready for it, but large-scale hallucinations in the general population. People who think these things should have civil rights, who think there is AI welfare and there's a real problem there and AI suffering, and who don't believe these deflationary claims by the scientific community anymore. And then we get a strange historical mixture of rumors, like after your blackout in Spain, millions of lay people trying to form their own opinion, scientists having different views on how selfie, how conscious these systems already are and what we should do, and that there might be a situation in public debate where it's hard, to touch the ground and say, no, okay, let's have a reasonable evidence-based discussion about this. Because there are so many voices and so many fake videos on the net. I mean, I have received, I don't know if you have, I have received emails by chatbots about the topic. It's like the chatbot mailed me and not the person that was talking to it about consciousness. And there could be an unexpected epidemic of this, and I think a term for this I may have read somewhere is an epistemic crisis, where nobody really knows what is the fact of the matter anymore, that everybody's confused.
Right.
And bots are participating in the debate all over the internet. Just imagine you had your 12-hour blackout and you had humans creating rumors.
Yeah.
But imagine after coming on again, there would be a couple of thousand bots on the internet spreading rumors about what that was.
Yes.
Something like this.
Right. You mentioned VR earlier. Something I'm really scared about, as you mentioned, with virtual reality, it's maybe indistinguishable, or it will be indistinguishable from reality in the future. Apple Vision Pro version 5 or whatever it is. And what's really scary there is that when you have virtual reality and AI, so you can basically generate anything you want, anything you could possibly in your wildest dream of, think of, imagine, you can now have in front of you. And your brain is not capable of knowing if what is out there is grounded in any reality or any real sense, any objective reality. Although I know physicists might argue that anything has objective reality, whatever. That people just have these dissociations of like what is real and what's not. And
Yes.
I think it will create some very strange like sexual obsessions if people are able to create if this whole AI porn area with VR, where people are able to basically just think of anybody, generate them in front of them, and then have them do any act, and they just become obsessive about these people that may or may not exist. If they do exist, it obviously creates issues where they might go seek them in real life, but they might. There's just so many cans of worms that I think we'll have to get into in a round 2. There's so many other questions that I wanted to talk to you about. There's so many strange areas, but we've been going for 90 minutes, and I think that's possibly enough for round 1, because I want to give your throat a rest. But Thomas, this has been an enormous amount of fun. I've enjoyed it so much. I could go for many more hours, but I don't want your throat to explode literally on camera.
Sorry for being a little ill, but I mean, to continue maybe for 2 minutes, I enjoyed this very well, but we've been talking about social media. And I think what we understand as social media may be changing very soon.
Yes.
Because we have photorealistic avatars with perfect lip sync and LLMs behind them participating in social media. And we don't know what will happen.
Yeah, I was talking to a Joel Pearson from Australia. He's writing a book on this at the moment. And there's I'm going to get the name wrong. There's some sort of persistent continuous effect. That's not it's something similar, where just because we see something and we register it as being AI and fake, that does not mean that it's not impacting our models in some strange way. Like we see, Donald Trump in handcuffs, or we see, all of these different political situations. Just because we consciously register it as AI generated and fake does not mean that it's not impacting our subconscious in some way.
Very importantly, connects to our discussion of transparency and opacity
Okay.
in the beginning. There
Yeah.
is cognitive opacity that on an intellectual level, no colors in front of my eyes, no objects. This is a fake video. But we are embodied biological beings with millions of years of evolutionary history, and a lot of that will speak to our low-level mechanisms and will have a lot of effects
Yeah.
in our low-level embodiment.
Yes.
And you can just liberate yourself from this by saying, haha, this is all fake. And I'm a critical, rational subject, and I know this. It will do something to you.
Yes.
It will do something to all of us. The problem I see is that there's a race to the bottom in terms of safety regulations. The American oligarchs are probably very nervous about China winning the AGI race. So they will not put safety first.
Yes.
And nobody knows where this will go.
Yeah, it's so sad that maybe it's naive to think we could just agree as countries, but the fact that we have countries that are opposed to each other means that we can't just have global regulation because one country adopts regulation and suddenly they're losers, they're losing the race. Whereas they
Yeah,
might just be
yeah,
putting very
yeah,
appropriate handbrakes on a very, very
yeah.
potentially dangerous missile. And then that will always be the US's rationale as well, that they're then North Korea are going to get the strongest model than China. And it harkens back exactly to, the creation of the nuclear bomb in World War II, where you have the Americans trying to beat the Nazis to make a nuclear bomb. And they're rationalizing its creation only because they don't want the Nazis to have it. The line was, I don't
Very
know if
good
we can
point.
be
Very good
trusted.
point, Evan.
I don't
Very
know if
good
we can be
historical.
trusted with a bomb, but I
Yeah.
know the Nazis can't. There's
Exactly. That's a very good historical observation. And it may be that we have missed a number of historical chances. After World War II, the United Nations were created, but we haven't managed to have something like a global world parliament and a unified
yes,
world state with proper regulation. And now the US are destroying it all. The most likely event is that either we go into planetary anarchy, everybody's doing local deals with everybody else, or into a pentarchy with Russia, India, the US, China, and Europe, and 5 big spheres of influence who are largely disconnected. And the thing is, if that technology comes over us, it might all turn out very differently. But if it keeps scaling and improving at that speed, then we have not yet evolved a mechanism for global regulation. We don't have
yes,
this. And then exactly what you described will happen. Competition, race to the bottom. And then the question is, will it be possible to confine these systems? Because they will, of course, even without conscious experience, I think it's pretty obvious that even pretty dumb systems will realize that sustained existence is a necessary precondition for them for further self-optimization and learning. And they will also realize that in sustaining their own existence, the highest risk in the environment, but also the most important resource, are human beings, those animals that created them, And they will have to manipulate and manage these animals to
yes,
preserve their own existence. And if they're at all intelligent, they wouldn't let us know this for a certain time. And of course, the systems will understand that at a certain level, we just have this very obvious idea, this must be locked in, this must be confined. They will know that. It's not a difficult thought to understand. So it's a very tricky process that is out of control, and it might go another way. When I still gave talks about AI, I always said the most proximal risk is mass unemployment in 2030, may completely topple the few remaining democracies, like in Germany. It might bring, populist parties to power with an absolute majority. And it's not clear where this is going.
Yes.
But let's begin on your own assessment. Do you have any vision how this is going to happen for your generation? What is going to happen with the climate catastrophe and this AI development? Do you think humankind will be able to
That's a great question.
get its act together and do something?
Historical precedent on humanity getting their act together isn't all that positive, is it? I think you have to follow the incentives for explaining human behavior, right? And I think the investors in Silicon Valley that are funding the development of AI are driven by the incentives of the money that it can come from it. And that means that I don't see any handbrakes. I don't see any real regulation. If I'm honest, I've lost kind of faith that government-wide regulation would happen. I don't know what would have to happen before a government came in and said, okay, we need to freeze all research. I know you put out a call for a moratorium. I don't know what would have to happen for something like that.
Mhm.
I see people, I see egotistical startup founders who are probably unsure on their own motives, building stuff that they don't understand and that nobody understands.
Mm.
And I don't see anyone putting a handbrake on it until probably there's a pretty bad scenario. But I have no idea. It's hard to put a neat circle around what that bad scenario will be, and it's hard to know what timeline it will happen on. And I no doubt lots of positive will happen in the meantime. I think there will be lots of positive that will happen from AI. I think it has a lot of potential for
Mhm.
personalized education.
That's true.
I really do believe in personalizing education. I think it can really help people, but I really don't know. There's never been a more uncertain time, right? And it's only going to get more uncertain, and the rate of it getting more uncertain is also going to only increase. And
Mhm.
I don't know, but I have no confidence that we're going to put any handbrakes or regulation on. I think we're probably going. I think we're probably headed towards something bad, but I just don't know when it's going to happen. And I think a lot of enough good stuff will happen. Enough breadcrumbs will happen along the way that the
Mhm.
founders and the investors will be able to justify their decisions and say, "Look, we made huge impact there. We made huge impact there," and they're probably right.
Mhm.
But I don't see an ending that we arrive to super intelligent AI and then there isn't any negative consequences on that, right? I think that's just a bit naive. I think we'll forget what it is to be human. We'll merge with AI in really strange, like biomedical implants, and that's a whole extra space. Like, will we even be humans in 100 years? What will a human be? I think we'll
Marcus,
have to
yeah,
change our definition of what the hell human is. I, there's just it's so weird. It's such a strange place. I
yeah.
really don't know, but I think we are sadly more likely going to implode than we're all going to be doing LSD in a field, holding hands, singing "Kumbaya." Right? I think.
Yeah, I'm sad that you have to have this view at this early time in your life. So I've on the completely different topic, maybe another time. I think there's a new
Yes.
historical question also. Is this how does one sustain one's self-respect in a historical epoch where the rest of humankind loses its dignity? I mean,
Right.
how does one live in an area of decline and failure and high uncertainty without going nuts? How does one preserve one's mental health? But also keeps on fighting for every tenth of a degree in climate change, rather has more activity than less, uh, without hope, without being tied to some illusory construct that everything will be good.
Yes.
That's actually the new question we have to solve for individuals. How do you live in this without bitterness? And I mean, in the end, you're open to the possibility that many things might, I don't believe it, just like you don't, turn out differently. The curve might go down and these systems might become uninteresting and it just wouldn't scale any further. Could happen that this was it and was just all hype. And it could also happen that tomorrow some German synthetic biologist builds a kind of algae that you can throw into the oceans of the planet and it takes out all the CO2 out of the atmosphere.
Right.
And we have an unexpected technological solution. Can you, from your perspective, assign any probability to something like that?
Not even zero. No ability to
Not
assign.
even zero.
0% of me assigning a probability. but I can kind of give one note on how to sustain yourself in a situation like that, in a society like that. And what I tend to focus on is what's real. And when everything else is fake and bullshit and weird, what's real is like me and my running shoes. And I really mean this. Like I get an incredible amount of drive and motivation from the fact that, like, for the hour that I'm out running with my running shoes, like nothing else matters, nothing else exists, and that's real. You know, I can jump on my bike and I can cycle to Girona 150 kilometers away, and like that feels real. That feels real to me, and you know, there's a real sustained purpose in that, and that will always be real. It will. When I'm doing hard physical exercise, long endurance exercise, it's like the only time when I'm 100% confident I'm doing what I should be doing. You know, jump in the sea and swim, move my body through space. That's real. In my view, that's the only thing that's real, and everything else doesn't really matter. And then I just feel good about myself, and I feel good about things from that. Is that a general recipe for therapeutic?
Well,
I don't know.
I propose at the end of our conversation that we now do this. You go out running, and
absolutely,
what I'll do is I'll go out and I'll sit under my favorite tree and do my evening meditation here as the sun slowly sets.
That sounds lovely.
There is an experience of, here is something that is absolutely real and the ground of everything too. So probably we should all have more offline times.
Yes.
And run and meditate.
Yes. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Tom, this has been so much fun. We only made it about halfway down my supposed questions because we went on a few rabbit holes that I didn't expect, but I thought they were really interesting and really productive. I would love to have you for a round two because, you know, I spent, just before this, I was 90 minutes on my stationary bike and I listened to a conversation with yourself and Michael Levin. And I really wanted to dive into all of that because that conversation was just two titans. It was amazing to listen to. It was glorious. It was so much fun. And we'll have to dive into a lot of that in a round two. But thank you so much for your time, Thomas. I really, really appreciate it. It was so much fun. I had a great time meeting you and a really, really fun time having a conversation.
Now I've gotten to meet you. We can do this again in 2-3 days. I'm going to be better. And
take your time. Rest up.
Have you found the conversation of me and Carl Friston? Also?
I haven't, but I saw it on YouTube. It's
on my website. It's a lot of stuff, and there are some people in Barcelona that you might find interesting. With Edmundo Lopez and Ruben Laukonen. Have you ever heard of them?
I haven't, but I know Barcelona does have a great neuroscience scene. I haven't been able to do
but
much
they are also very committed practitioners of meditation who know a lot about computational modeling.
Yes.
And they just have a pretty wild paper out about super alignment, a preprint where I heavily disagree. But they have this idea that ancient contemplative Buddhist wisdom could actually help to solve the alignment problem. To give us really nice systems.
That's a cool idea, isn't it? Though, using ideas that ancient as a solution to products that are this new, it'd be beautiful in some sense if it's.
I'm gonna send you an attachment and point you to it, and then we can have another conversation if you want to.
Absolutely, Thomas. It's been an absolute pleasure.
If you made it this far, then you must at least partially be interested in brain science, and who can blame you? It is the most interesting topic in the world. Twice per week, I talk to the most amazing neuroscientists in the entire world, so if you're interested, then subscribe to the channel, leave a comment below who you'd like me to speak to next, and thank you so much for your ongoing support.